For years, nutrition science has been caught in a tug-of-war. On one side is the Paleo hypothesis, the idea that humans are hunter-gatherers trapped in a modern world, physically unsuited for agricultural food. On the other side is the anti-Paleo hypothesis, which claims our species has already evolved the traits needed to thrive on a diet of grain and dairy. This mismatch between our ancient genetics and our modern plates is directly linked to the rise in chronic diseases like obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular failure. To test these conflicting theories, researchers at Michael R. Rose's UC Irvine laboratory utilized Drosophila melanogaster, or common fruit flies. Because flies age and reproduce in weeks, they serve as a genetic time machine, allowing scientists to witness thousands of generations of dietary adaptation in just a few years. The results of these experiments revealed that both sides of the diet war were missing a biological constant. The ideal diet is dictated by your age. The lab mapped this by using 3 distinct test diets. The first was an ancestral baseline made of apples. This represents thousands of years of deep history, the equivalent of the human paleo diet. The second was a recent adaptation diet made of bananas. This represents roughly 1,000 generations of recent laboratory history, mirroring human agricultural staples like grains. The third was a completely novel diet made of oranges. This was an alien food source with zero evolutionary precedent for these specific flies. This setup, observed closely under the microscope, allowed the team to see exactly how organisms process food from entirely different eras of their own history. By mapping these diets against the fly's entire lifespan, the lab identified the specific boundaries of where evolutionary adaptation begins and ends. The results for the novel orange diet were a universal failure. Regardless of their age, the flies were unable to thrive on a food source they hadn't evolved with. This orange diet is the fly equivalent of industrialized, ultra-processed foods, products our bodies have zero genetic recognition of. This rule holds true for human populations with zero agricultural history, such as certain indigenous groups. Because their ancestors never transitioned to farming, their bodies lack the necessary recent adaptations, requiring an ancestral diet their entire lives to maintain health. The first major takeaway was simple. Without enough evolutionary time to build a genetic defense, novel foods are biologically destructive. However, the data shifted for populations with deep agricultural ancestry. Surprisingly, young flies actually thrived on their recently introduced banana diet. In humans, this means young people of farming descent are often perfectly capable of digesting recent evolutionary inventions like grains and dairy. This resilience is fueled by Hamilton's forces, a biological principle measuring the strength of natural selection at different ages. These forces peak during an organism's youth and reproductive years. This intense pressure forces the rapid genetic adaptation needed to survive agricultural diets. For young adults with farming ancestors, this biological reality overrides the strict paleo-only argument. They possess the active machinery to process these newer foods. Natural selection is highly efficient at keeping us adapted to our current environment, but only for as long as we are capable of reproducing. Eventually, every organism hits a biological cliff. Once the reproductive window closes, Hamilton's forces vanish and the evolutionary pressure to maintain adaptation drops toward zero. This chart shows the age-dependent fitness of the flies, or PXMX. Notice how the blue line, representing the recently adapted banana diet, drops sharply as the flies age. Look at the intersection where the red line, the ancestral apple diet, suddenly crosses above the banana diet. This suggests that our genetic adaptations to recent diets are essentially a temporary shield. They expire as Hamilton's forces weaken in late life. For humans, this implies that as we get older, we lose our youthful ability to safely process modern agricultural foods. Genetic adaptation is not a permanent status. It's a timed biological advantage that eventually runs out. This research points toward a 2-step diet switch. Step 1. Enjoy an organic agricultural diet during your youth, when your Hamiltonian adaptation shield is still active. Step 2. As you age, deliberately revert to an ancestral hunter-gatherer diet. This returns your body to the fuel source it is most deeply adapted to. This isn't just a wellness trend. It is a method to prolong human health span by matching our behavior to our shifting evolutionary biology. The ultimate diet isn't found by looking at just one era of history, but by adjusting our fuel to match the ticking of our own evolutionary clock.